Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. Thanks so much for being with us. In 2011, an all-encompassing documentary about the world of movies called The Story of Film, an Odyssey premiered on British television. Later that same year, made its way to the U.S. with a screening at the Telluride Film Festival in Colorado. Well, since we're saluting Telluride all day today, we thought it would be a great time to show the first chapter of this 15-part documentary series here in the U.S. in its U.S. television debut. Well, after this, every Monday in the primetime hours on TCM through December 9th, we're going to premiere a new chapter of the series with an encore showing the following Tuesday night. And programming around each of these chapters will be some of the films mentioned in that particular segment. In all, it's going to be 119 movies from 29 countries. Well, tonight, Chapter 1 begins logically with the birth of movie making in 1895. And joining me right now is the man who wrote, directed, and narrated all the segments in this entire series, and that's Mark Cousins. And Mark, I'm happy to say, is going to be with me to co-host each chapter in the weeks to come. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Robert.
Good to have you here.
I'm very happy to be here.
I have to ask you first, you put this all together. What are your qualifications for doing that?
First of all, I'm a movie lover.
Right.
I watched movies since childhood. Then I studied film history and art history, so I became very interested in visuals and how people tell stories with imagery. Then I became a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker, so I did that for a long time. So
it's based where, basically?
I live in
here.
So I come from Belfast in Northern Ireland, but I live in Scotland, so I've got a bit of those two accents going on. And it comes from a kind of passionate love of cinema.
But you wrote a book as well,
yes, right? I've done a number of books. I did one on the history of documentary film, but then I wrote one, The Story of Film, and that was the one in which this film is based. And I tried to look at movies from around the globe, you know, and I'd been traveling a lot and seeing films in many different countries. And I just noticed that what a universal language the movies is and I tried to capture some of that in the book and in the film.
And where did your passion for movies start?
I don't know. I think I was brought up in Belfast. There was a war going on, but and I was quite a nervous little boy. But then I went into a cinema, the dark space, the lights go down, the curtain opens, and I could feel myself unwinding, and I felt as if cinema took me in its embrace. And it was bigger than life. You look on the screen and it's luminous and it's vibrant and it's full of other types of people in other parts of the world. And it felt to me, sitting in the movies, it felt like sitting in winter looking at summer. You know, there was that kind of plenitude. And how could you not love that, you know?
Now, where'd you get your financing for this?
It was a low-budget film, actually. I sort of backpacked a lot as I was making the film.
Right.
We got money in the end from some UK government funding, from UK TV, etc. But we didn't pay ourselves very much, which meant it didn't cost much to make. But then we sold it to different countries, and it's sold to many countries now.
Right. And how long did it take you to make this? This is such a big project.
Yeah, a long time. It took 6 years to shoot. We started in Egypt and then went to China.
How big of a group is this?
Well, there was me and my producer. So two of us, sometimes one of us, depending on which bit of the world.
So did you basically do all the interviews that we get in?
Yes, yes.
You alone?
And I shot it as well. And
wow.
To work simply.
It's a real labor of love.
Yeah, but you know, when you work simply with a small crew, then it gives you freedom.
Sure.
Yeah, so we had a lot of freedom.
Well, it's a huge project. Yeah. I congratulate you on it.
Thank you very much.
So let's have a look. And again, I'm going to say Mark's going to be with us again next Monday to co-host Chapter 2 in this series. But right now, Chapter 1 of the series that Mark created in 2011, here for the first time on television in the United States. The Story of Film, an Odyssey, subtitled The World Discovers a New Art Form. Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. Last Monday on TCM, we premiered Chapter 1 of the 15-part documentary series, The Story of Film, an Odyssey. Covered the very beginnings of filmmaking in 1895 through the year 1917. Well, coming right up, we have Chapter 2 for you, and this one is subtitled The Triumph of American Film and the First of Its Rebels, which covers the years 1918 through 1928. And a little reminder here, every Monday through December 9th, we're going to have an all-new installment in the series, and each of those episodes are going to be surrounded by movies that are talked about in that particular segment. And joining me right now, as he will be every Monday night through December 9th, is the man behind the documentary, film historian Mark Cousins. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you, Robert. Nice to be here.
Now, these years that we're going to cover, this is really the apex of silent filmmaking.
Yes.
What was so different about what was going on in Hollywood at that time and in Europe?
This is when Hollywood became Hollywood. You know, before this period, Hollywood was still like a garden.
Right.
Yeah, but it really became a factory in this moment. And that was really exciting. This was when film started to turn into a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of the machine and the different types of filmmakers that came out of that. So that was new. But already...
So now they're really a competition of the European filmmakers
yes,
at this
of course,
point, right?
World War I had happened. Europe had been devastated.
Right.
So those film industries in France and Scandinavia, which had led the way, they were flattened, really. Mm-hmm. So suddenly Hollywood bloomed. This fertile land of Hollywood started to produce great filmmakers and attract great filmmakers. And not only, sometimes when we talk about an industry, it sounds, as you know, like it's a very mechanical type of film. But as we know, Chaplin came along in these days, the great improviser, the great jazz musician, you could say, of cinema came along. And then also in these years, the great incredible rebel filmmakers who, like Stroheim, mm-hmm. who were doing films like Greed, ultra-realistic.
Between them here,
yes,
in Hollywood.
Yeah, yes, and ultra-realistic, challenging the conventional way of making movies. So already in the movie history, you've got this beautiful tension between like entertainment cinema and people who wanted movies to be more spiky or edgy or relevant or soul-searching. That tension, I think, has remained through movie history, and it's in this period that it first emerges.
How do Europeans feel about that, the European filmmakers?
Back then, they loved it. You know, Hollywood was like a think tank. It was where youth and glamour was made. You know, Hollywood was creating new ideas about youth and glamour in those days, you know, and that was very exciting for anyone, and it was a totally international idea.
We also have to point out that in the silent screen days, you know, films were more international than they could be when sound came in.
Absolutely.
When soundtracks then affected it, because all they had to do is put the title cards
yes.
in their own language,
yeah.
and it was a movie that anybody in any country could understand.
Absolutely. When sound came along, film was grounded more. It became more of a social thing. But
right.
in the silent period, it was almost like a magic carpet ride. It was floating, you know. And so Douglas Fairbanks and Greta Garbo weren't really rooted in one country. We
right.
couldn't say there's an American, there's a Swede.
International.
They were international. Stroheim and Chaplin and these great directors and the great women directors as well, and Keaton, etc. These people they were coming up, they were inventing an art form. How exciting.
Yeah.
That's why it's so thrilling to see this period in film history.
Well, let's jump right into it. Here, first shown on British television in 2011, we bring you the U.S. television premiere of Chapter 2 in the story of film, An Odyssey, subtitled The Triumph of American Film and the First of Its Rebels. Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. Thanks so much for joining us. Up next on TCM, we have the third installment of the documentary series, The Story of Film, An Odyssey. In the first two segments, the series focused mostly on filmmaking in the United States. In this next chapter, we get a look at what was going on in cinema around the world during the silent film era of the 1920s. Joining me is the man who created the series, wrote it, directed it, and narrates it, and gives us his vision of the story of film, film historian Mark Cousins. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you, Robert. It's nice to be here.
Now, what was particularly relevant about this that we're about to see?
This is a period when, for the first time, cinema became really global, by which I mean, of course, North America, Europe, but also Asia. Asia didn't invent cinema as we know America and France did. But when filmmakers in China and Japan started making film, they made films out of their own cultural traditions, their own philosophies, and we get a dazzling range of movies in the late 20s and the early 30s in Japan and in China, which really challenged the filmmakers back home.
And so we're also seeing silent filmmaking at its apex here.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were several decades in. The brightest minds in the world had come to cinema, worked out what it was, realized that it could do everything that philosophy could do, that painting could do, that music could do, and they made these series of masterpieces. Screen acting had been finessed, so it had become subtle and glorious. So a proper apex, as you say.
Was there anybody that in your research that you found that you think was such an international influence that we really don't know that much about here in the States?
This is exactly a key question about this period. So in China, there was a movie star called Ruan Yu. She was called the Chinese Greta Garbo.
Did people know her here then?
She was known here then because Chinese cinema was really good then. But she's been forgotten. And if you look even at the film encyclopedias, she's often not here. And yet we've got some of her work in this segment, and we see how great she was. She was acting in a subtle way, and not everyone was.
Now, in your search for film, to back up your, because you're making a documentary that requires film, was it difficult to get footage like that? Was that your big challenge?
It was very difficult.
Yeah.
I had to, in the case of the films of this actress Ruan Yu, I had to go to China and talk to the Chinese Film Archive, and there'd be sometimes an older lady or gentleman who had remembered her films, but her films would be on a dusty shelf somewhere at the back because no one asked them for them anymore. So the archivist would be pleased when someone like me, when I would go along and say, have you got any films by Ruan Yu? And they say, well, yes, we have. And the films are kept in beautiful, like, tissue paper, and it's like opening a special present. These films have been forgotten in some way. So it was hard to get them, but it was really worthwhile getting them.
This chapter has a lot to do with rebels in filmmaking. What's your definition of a rebel when it comes to making movies?
I think a rebel is someone who wants to annoy people, but also, more important, is an innovator. A rebel filmmaker is somebody who looks at the way we shoot movie stars, or the way we tell stories, or the way we build our films to climaxes, and says, no, there's another way of doing it. I can put the camera in another place. I can use sound in a less naturalistic way, or I can get my movie star not to have full makeup and maybe to work without makeup, for example. So a rebel is somebody who thinks outside the box, and he thinks there are other ways that we can use the movies to tell stories.
Well, let's see what you have here. Here in its U.S. television premiere, The Story of Film and Odyssey, Chapter 3, subtitled The Great Rebel Filmmakers Around the World.